Welcome on in. This is the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. It's round 3 preview day. We're going to preview all 8 matches of round 3 of the 2025 AFL season, so stick around. Don't forget to hit that like button. We're going to discuss all the matches. We'll do our tips. We'll do power rankings. We've got it all to see and say. So stick around. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome on in to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 17 of 2025. We've got the round 3 preview coming your way today. We're flying through the season. We're already up to round 3. Some teams, mainly just Hawthorn, playing their 4th game of the season so far. Other teams like Gold Coast just showing up for their 2nd. So we're going to be running through all 8 matches. I was about to say 9. There's only 8 matches this weekend. 1 by Collingwood and Sydney not playing this weekend. So, yeah, we'll be running through all 8 matches as we do every Thursday episode of the podcast. We do a little preview, so we'll run through them. We'll do our tips. We'll do our power rankings for the week heading into round 3. And if you're new here, welcome along. We also do a second podcast every week, which comes out on Mondays. Typically, look, I'm going to try and get it earlier in Mondays than I have been. That is a review episode of the weekend's football. So we go through all the stats, all the numbers, and everything there is to know about why your team won or lost, or both, if they drew. Both? That doesn't quite make sense, but you know what I mean. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe or follow depending on what platform you're on. This podcast goes live twice a week on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We also have other videos that go live. I'm going to try and do at least one every week going forward on the YouTube channel, so go check that out. Go check out the socials. Twitter, we tweet a lot. Blue Sky, we've got quite a bit happening over there, and Instagram as well. TikTok is starting to ramp up as well as the season goes. So go check out all of that content. Yeah, all your football needs, one spot. We don't talk about junk, we talk about football. Yeah, so let's jump into, I guess, the first match of this weekend. It's round 3. And on Thursday night, which is the 27th of March, at 7:30 p.m. local time at Marvel Stadium, we got the Bombers v the Power. This is going to be an interesting game, to say the least. Last time Port Adelaide were in Melbourne was 2 weeks ago, and it was not a night to remember for them. Last time the Bombers walked out onto a football field was also not a night to remember for them, or an afternoon to remember for them even. They got pumped by Adelaide Crows on Saturday. So we're going to jump into everything you need to know about this match. Neither team particularly will be stoked with the start to the season, but Port Adelaide certainly in the better shape after 2 matches than the Bombers. At least the Power did get the win against Richmond on Saturday afternoon last week over in Adelaide. Recent history between these two teams. If you don't remember, they played in Gather Round last year. It was obviously at the Adelaide Oval, being Gather Round. And to be honest, it was probably Port Adelaide's best performance in the first half of the year last year. Certainly after quarter time or halfway through the second quarter, they absolutely dominated the game from then on in. And vice versa, it was one of the Bombers' worst performances of the year. They really struggled after quarter time. It ended up being a 69-point margin, 17-9 to 6-6. So the Power did flog them. 2023, in round 16, they did meet in Melbourne, and the Power did win it by 4 points. Not sure if you remember this one, but this should be, if my memory serves me correctly, the one where Danny Houston kicked a goal after the siren. So that one was at the MCG. It was in the wet. And Danny Boy Houston, who has since left Port Adelaide, kicked the winner. So I mean, most people probably remember that moment, if not the rest of the game. And the time before that, they met over in Adelaide, which was, again, a narrow win, a 5-point victory to Port Adelaide. No after the siren heroics in that one, but still. So Port Adelaide certainly have the wood over the last few encounters. However, none of them at Marvel, so it will be interesting to see how, I guess, that one plays out. The Bombers typically are, or have been over the last couple of years, certainly last year, a better team, I think, at Marvel than at the MCG. I'm not 100% sure on the numbers of that, but it certainly feels like they play better at Marvel, so maybe that will help them. Offensively, they look okay, in all honesty. They score pretty well. Like, they scored 85 week 1 against Hawthorn. They scored 100 against Adelaide. So they're scoring okay. Their ability to stop the other team from scoring, though, is a major concern. So they've conceded 111 against Hawthorn, 161 against Adelaide. They're massive numbers. They need to find a way to stop the opposition from scoring. Their clearance game has been pretty solid this year. So far, they're winning that most weeks. Both weeks, I think, they have won the clearances. But, yeah, their team defending, they turn it over a bit. There's just a lot of issues, I think, for Essendon at the moment. Meanwhile, if you jump over the other side to Port Adelaide, week 1 couldn't have gone much worse for them when they played Collingwood at the MCG. Yeah, that was, I won't say a disaster, but it was certainly not the start to the season they wanted. But they did manage to bounce back the next week against Richmond and score really well, win quite comfortably, wipe out most of their bad percentage from their first round. So, positives, yes, from that. I don't know what we take from it. It was Richmond. I know Richmond won week 1, but yeah, I don't think we take too much from that one. And to be honest, even if they smash Essendon this week, I don't think we take much from it as well. If they were to lose to Essendon, we certainly would probably lower our thoughts on Port Adelaide. But at the moment, I'm still kind of in that zone where I'm not sure where they're at, because the loss to Collingwood was really bad. Win against Richmond was good, but I don't know what to read into that. So, overall, I haven't really given you a whole heap there, have I? Port Adelaide are going to go in favourites. Obviously, Essendon were atrocious last week. I'm not going to say that Essendon will upset Port Adelaide here, because I think Port Adelaide should win and will win. But football's a strange game. If there was going to be an upset, it probably wouldn't be the most surprising thing I've ever seen. Zach Merritt's in flying form. Jai Caldwell has started the season outstanding for the Bombers. They have a very young team. They've probably copped a fair shellacking this week in the media and internally as well, I'm sure. The coach is challenging them. They're a team that is pretty good at pressure. Their first game against Hawthorn, they tackled really well. Through the preseason, they tackled really well. I don't know if we can say the same about them last week against Adelaide, so maybe they'll come out this week and really pump that pressure up and really take it to Port Adelaide, because I think that's the way to beat Port Adelaide, in all honesty, from what I've seen from them last year and early this season, is pressure. If you let them have uncontested football, they will destroy you. It's just a matter of time. The more uncontested football they get, the better they look, in all honesty. So if you do tackle hard, you do put pressure on every single one of their touches, you don't let them have those uncontested marks all day like they did in pre-season, and Richmond kind of allowed a lot of it again last week. You set yourself up to really take it to this Port Adelaide team. So I think that's the key for the Bombers here. If they are to win, they just need to really bring that pressure. They need to, not allow any easy touches for Port Adelaide. And I think that is going to be the number one priority for the Bombers. Meanwhile, for Port Adelaide, it's pretty much the reverse. Look after the football as much as they can. They probably will lose clearances. Certainly won't win them by much, I wouldn't have thought. So they're going to be relying on their defence, which they do have a pretty solid defence. So if they can defend well, cause those turnovers, and get them on the counter-punch, whether that's fast transition or not, probably doesn't matter too much. They just need to find space, and they will win this, I would imagine. Game number 2 is at Marvel Stadium again. It's Friday night football. It's the Blue Baggers versus the Doggies. We're back to the Western Bulldogs after being Footscray for 1 week and 1 week only. 100th year celebration last weekend for the Doggies, and it was a great night, except for the fact that they didn't get over the line. So a bit disappointing for them in that regard. Wow. Big game for both clubs, let's be honest. Probably a more important game for Carlton, in all honesty, than it is for the Doggies. Doggies have excuses. They've started the season pretty well. They won, obviously, round 1. They only just lost by a kick last week. And they've got a lot of troops out. So you kind of expect that whatever they can manage at the moment is only going to get better for them as the season progresses. Whereas Carlton, they're under the pump at the moment. They're under some pressure. The coach is under pressure. The players are under pressure. And they need to start finding ways to win. Maybe heading to Marvel Stadium is what they need. I was always of the opinion the Bulldogs were a really good Marvel team. So that's not great for them. However, I said that about this time last year when the Doggies played the Bombers at Marvel, and the Bombers absolutely destroyed them. So maybe I'm wrong on that. We'll see. What to make of the Blues start to the season? They should have won round 1. They outplayed Richmond for a fair chunk of it. They were 41 points up. They kicked poorly and they lost by 13 points. And then they followed that up Thursday night last week. It was a wet game. Mackay was out. Curnow was clearly underdone. I don't care what Michael Voss says. He was clearly underdone and did not play his role. And they lost by 20 points in the wet. So conditions weren't great for him as well. I just want to point that out. But what do you make of their start to the season? I don't think it's as bad as what maybe the media / Carlton fans think it is. Truth be told, they could come out and beat the Bulldogs here, and then they could come out next weekend and beat Collingwood, and everything will be forgotten and forgiven, and it'll be onwards and upwards for them. However, if they were to lose both of these games and be 0-4, that's when it starts to become a little bit of an issue for these guys. So probably a very important 2 weeks for them. Doggies just got over the line against Kangaroos, which is now starting to look like a better win because they went out and smacked the Demons last weekend. As we said, they lost by a kick to Collingwood last Friday night at the MCG. Sam Darcy, he's the key for the Bulldogs right now. Until they start getting Bont, Treloar, there's others as well, all these players back, it's Darcy. Yeah, Libba was absolutely fantastic in the middle, don't get me wrong. He was, in my opinion, best on ground. But it's Darcy. If you can't stop him, which at the moment it's very hard to do because he's just so tall and he clunks them every time. Most of the time kicks straight, did kick a couple behinds, hit the post a couple times in that fourth quarter last week. But he's going to be the one that teams have to work out a way to stop him. Because he will absolutely tear teams to shreds. Wiedering is one of the best defenders in the competition, so if anybody's going to be able to do it, maybe it is Carlton. We'll see. But yeah, that's their number one priority, I think, heading into this game. you look at the history of these two teams. They met last year, just the once. It was round 18, and it was at Marvel Stadium, so same ground as this. That was a Saturday evening game, so not the same time as this one. Carlton started it pretty well, led most of the way through the first half, but the Doggies kicked away and kind of controlled most of the second half to win by 14 points in a pretty inaccurate kicking display from both teams. So make of that what you will. Obviously, Bulldogs look a little bit different than they did that day. Two of their better players were Bontempelli. Obviously, he's always in their best list. And Jamara Ugle-Hagan kicked 4 for them. So it looks a little different for the Doggies in this one. In 2023, they met just the once, which was round 9. The Doggies won that one by 20 points. And in 2022, they met all the way back in round 2. And the Blues won that one by 12. So the Doggies have the last couple. And they're going to be going into this favourites. Albeit slight favourites. I think the Doggies have been playing pretty well for the stocks they have out. But every week you got to think they are a little bit vulnerable, even if they haven't shown it hugely just yet. They're one of the more consistent teams to start the season so far, which is funny because typically over the last few years they've probably been the most inconsistent team in the AFL. But both of their performances have rated pretty similarly across the 2 weeks. Whereas a lot of other teams have been up and down or down and up. So it will be interesting. I don't know which way we're going, to be honest, in this one. I'm very hesitant to write off Carlton just yet. I think they're going better than they appear to be. As I said, they should have beaten Richmond. They kicked absolutely horribly in front of goal that day. Most of the numbers say they should have won. They just made some terrible mistakes and kicked poorly, and got caught out by the pressure in that second half, in all honesty. And against Hawthorn, they weren't that bad. Hawthorn haven't lost a game yet this season, and they only lost by 20 points and were well and truly in the game most of the way. So I could see this being an upset, in all honesty. I think it's going to come down to probably Darcy. At the moment, the Bulldogs are relying on their guns. So it's Darcy, it's Libba, it's Bailey Dale. It's like their best players in each area of the ground are the ones that are carrying this team. It certainly was the fact last week against Collingwood. And then the rest of the team probably didn't carry the load. I'm not saying only 3 were good, but I'm saying like their bottom half of their team really didn't carry the load, which you got to understand is probably going to happen because they've got playing players that perhaps won't be in their best 23 once the good players come back. So you kind of forgive it, but that's where this game's at. I have it. Bulldogs should win, but I'm not confident in it in the slightest. Next up, we go Saturday afternoon, and it's the Gold Coast Suns who are playing their second game of the season. And it's their second away game of the season, so they haven't even been up at home yet. And the crazy thing is, last year they were terrible on the road, whereas this year they're 1-0 so far, and they're going in as favourites to be 2-0, which is even more crazy. It's Melbourne, Gold Coast, Saturday afternoon at the MCG. I wouldn't imagine this will be a big crowd. Probably only going to be 25,000. It's going to look empty. I'm not 100% sure what the weather's doing. I haven't looked yet. But if it's wet, it'll be even worse than that. As I said, Gold Coast are slight favourites in this one, which you can kind of understand. They were really good in round 1, had the bye last week, whereas Melbourne were really good in round 1, albeit losing to GWS, who are considered by many as one of the best teams in the competition. But Melbourne were atrocious last week. I know North Melbourne were very good, but they conceded 6 goals in 10 minutes in that final quarter. And they just didn't. They didn't look good. Back to the MCG here. Does help. But what to make of that last week, I don't know. So Demons definitely under a lot of pressure here. Gold Coast nowhere near as much. A lot of hope for Gold Coast this year. They obviously won their first game against West Coast over in the West. Absolutely smoked them. West Coast came out and were a lot better in week 2. So does that make their first week win look better? Maybe. Maybe not. It's another one that, I mean, you could argue either way, could go both ways. But Melbourne weren't great last week. I expect to see them do a lot better here. In all honesty, Melbourne actually have the better of this matchup over the recent years. And their last 3 meetings have all been Gold Coast home games. Round 23 last year they met, so it took all the way to the second last week. Gold Coast, who up until that point had not lost a home match that year, lost their last one, which was against Melbourne, a Melbourne team that didn't have much to play for, and the next week were atrocious. Melbourne beat them by 54 points, absolutely smoked them. So make of that what you will for Gold Coast, but not a great performance there. 2023 they met up on the Gold Coast as well, so Melbourne won that one by 5 points, and then 2022 in round 2 they met again up on the Gold Coast, and that went the way of Melbourne by 13 points. So the history says Melbourne, the fact that all of those were home games for Gold Coast as well suggests Melbourne, again, even slightly more favourites, I guess, because of that. If Melbourne hadn't have been so bad last week, then Melbourne would certainly be favourites here, the Demons. They were still in that game last week, up until 3/4 time. They were only 3 goals down at 3/4 time, which isn't a great spot to be in, but it's within range of getting the win. But North Melbourne absolutely tore them to shreds in that final quarter. What we make of that, what we make of these teams, we haven't seen enough of Gold Coast, in all honesty, yet this season. They've only played one game. It was against West Coast, who looked like a bunch of witches' hats for most of the day. So I'm looking forward to, I guess, seeing Gold Coast this weekend, seeing if they can improve, I guess, play better. Play better? They played well last time. But you know what I mean. Put in another performance equal to that. A win here would be massive for Gold Coast if they were to win their first 2 away games, knowing that they have 11 home games coming up this season. You got to put them in a really good spot to play finals if they can get this win. Meanwhile, Melbourne, they lose this. It's not the end of their season. Teams come back from losing their first 3. Look at Brisbane last year. They won a premiership after losing their first 3. But it certainly won't be easy if they are to lose this. They haven't been great in the clearance game. They haven't been great in many areas of the game, in all honesty. They should have won against GWS, but they wasted that chance, and now they're in the position where if they were to lose to Gold Coast in round 3, their season is slipping away very fast. So I think the smart tip is Gold Coast. But I think at the same time, Melbourne have the history of this matchup. This is also in Melbourne. Melbourne are obviously going to play MCG better than they play Marvel. So maybe we just forget last week. Give them a complete forgive. We've been giving teams forgives for one bad result. So maybe that's what we do here. Maybe we say, let's write off last week. Let's go back to the week before. They played really good football out at the MCG. So basically what I'm saying is maybe I'm going to change my tip to Melbourne. I can't remember what my tips on this podcast will be because, we'll get to them in a minute. But maybe I will actually change my tip to Melbourne. Maybe. I might have convinced myself today. I don't know why, but talking about it has kind of convinced me a little bit towards Melbourne side of things. Even if that is not overly confident. The next game of the weekend is also another one at Marvel. So the third game for the weekend at Marvel. It's St Kilda Richmond Saturday evening game, so that will be a 4:15 kickoff local time. Saints obviously going into this as heavy favourites. No surprise. It's Marvel Stadium. We saw what they did at Marvel last weekend against Geelong. You'd imagine that this is probably an easier ask for them going up against Richmond, who obviously, yes, they were good in week 1. They weren't much last week against Port Adelaide. St Kilda had a terrible start to their year. I think, as I kind of have said all year long, one bad result we forgive. Multiple bad results you start to worry about it. But they were bad week 1, but they turned it around. Marvel Stadium against Geelong. I was at that game. The fact that they only won by 7 points is astonishing to me because they were by far the better team on the night. Geelong just made use of their opportunities late and controlled that whole last quarter, but just couldn't score. Meanwhile, Richmond, it's going to be a tough season for them. Some weeks they will look okay when they get that pressure up, but they're a young team mostly, so that consistency will be hard for them to find. I'm still not convinced we'll see more than 2 or 3 wins from them this year. And the fact that we've already seen one, I highly, highly doubt we'll see their second this weekend. History of these two teams, they met twice last year. The second time was in Melbourne, and the Tigs lost by 48 points. St Kilda absolutely controlled that game. The other time they met was a little bit of an interesting one. It was Gather Round. I can't remember which ground it was, whether it was Norwood Oval maybe, or was it up in the mountains? I don't know. Either way, Richmond were up by 5 goals, I think, in that first half. It was like 5-0 closing in on half-time. I think St Kilda might have managed one just before half-time. And then St Kilda ended up controlling the whole second half. They won it 9-13, so some poor kicking, but won it by 7 points over the Tigers. And then you go back 2023, round 22, St Kilda won it by 36 points. That was the last time St Kilda was the home team. Between these two teams, look, it's hard to go against St Kilda winning this one, in all honesty. They should win this comfortably. So the last 3, they've won 36, by 7, and by 48. I'd be very surprised if they didn't win by more than all 3 of those, to be honest. They should win by 50 plus. Richmond, they're just a young team. If they play like they did last week, they will get absolutely demolished here. And you kind of just got to expect that and allow it. And some weeks they will show up and not lose by as much. But I don't think this will be the one. I think St Kilda, if they play anything like they did last weekend, should win this one quite comfortably, no matter what Richmond shows up with, I think. Next game is Saturday night football. I've clicked on the wrong game. Up at the Gabba, it's Brisbane Geelong. It's the rescheduled match after the Cyclone delayed the start to the season for Brisbane and Geelong in opening round. It's been moved to round 3. It's Saturday night football, and what an absolute cracker it will be. In a crazy twist of fate from the gods, it's meant to pour down in Brisbane on Saturday again. So, potentially, could be a wet game. Which is insane that they rescheduled this one and it's going to be crazy weather again. But you can't control the weather. What does that mean? I don't know. It's actually, speaking of craziness, I'm pretty sure these two teams met early last year at the Gabba in round 6 in a wet and wild game. And they did. It was a crazy game that day too. It was a low-scoring affair, and Brisbane kicked poorly, 4-13. Geelong kicked 9-63. What's the chances? These two teams love the wet, apparently, up at the Gabba. They obviously then met again later in the season in a preliminary final at the MCG. That was not wet weather. That was perfect conditions. And the Lions won that one. And then 2023, they met in July, and the Lions won that one by 11 points. So Brisbane have an okay record outside of the fact that this time last year, or round 6 last year, the Cats did actually get over the line in a wet weather game. This being a wet weather game this weekend, maybe just maybe that does just twist the needle a little bit towards the Cats in this one. The Lions are going in pretty heavy favourites, which I think mainly is people's reactions to Geelong's poor performance last weekend against St Kilda. Tom Stewart is out. Teams haven't been announced yet, but it's not confirmed yet that Tom Stewart's not playing, I don't think. I think he's officially a test. I doubt he'll play. But I just don't confidently pick either team in this one. Brisbane are 2-0. They just got over the line in a road game against Sydney to start the season. But they didn't beat West Coast by as much as perhaps they should have last week. They did have more scoring shots. They had their chances, but they started the game pretty poorly in their forward 50. Kind of actually resembled a lot of what they did early season last year, where they just weren't able to convert their opportunities. They were dominant around the ground. Their midfield was dominant. Their backline was dominant. They were good at getting the ball inside 50, but they just weren't great at converting it into shots. And when they did convert it into shots, they didn't kick very straight. So it's a little bit of a concern early season for them, but they managed to get over that last year. Sometime around about round 5 or 6, might have been 7 or 8, 9, somewhere around there. They started to turn that around. So maybe that's all they need to do again this year, is just find that spark. And the positive for them this year is the fact that they're 2-0, whereas last year they were 0-3, even though they were wasting chances. So, yeah, that's a definite positive for them. You move over to Geelong. Their season couldn't have started better in round 1. Fremantle down at the Cattery, and they absolutely smoked them. And everyone was all of a sudden all on the Cats for 2025. I mean, I was on the Cats pre-season. And then that game made me really feel like, hey, this is it. This is their season. But then what they showed up with on last Saturday night kind of made you think maybe just maybe that's not the real deal. I think we forget last weekend, though, in all honesty. They are not a Marvel team. They never have been. They have always kind of played quite a lot worse at Marvel. And St Kilda are a Marvel team that plays that ground really well. So I think we just completely forget about it. Bailey Smith probably comes back into the team this weekend. We'll see if Tom Stewart does play or not. But I think you'll see a much better Geelong performance this weekend. And in all honesty, if it rains, maybe that will help them. They did manage to beat the Lions last year in the wet at the Gabba. Maybe I tipped Geelong. I certainly wouldn't have tipped them yet, but we'll see. I still think Brisbane are the better team at the Gabba. I think these two teams are potentially the grand final teams, to be honest. It's a long season, so whatever does happen, happens, but it is what it is. I haven't really steered you too well here, I don't think, but Brisbane will go in favourites, but I think Geelong are value, is what I'm saying. There you go. Geelong at the line, get on it. Don't actually bet smart, bet responsibly. But what I'm saying is, the line looks good. There's another Saturday night game. It was always going to be a Saturday night game. This one, it's Hawthorn GWS down in Launceston for a Saturday night fixture in Tassie. You don't get too many night fixtures down in Launceston, but we get one here, and it's Hawthorn GWS. What a cracker this is shaping up to be. Both teams undefeated coming into it. Hawthorn 3-0, GWS 2-0. You couldn't ask for a better build-up, I don't think, for a game. What a cracker we're going to have. Two teams that have high hopes for this season. Both teams started the season well. Hawthorn going in quite heavy favourites, mainly because, hey, it's their home game. Down in Lonnie, they play Utah Stadium really well. They haven't really put a foot wrong yet this season. They're 3-0. They haven't beaten anyone of great significance yet, I don't think. Sydney, well, we'll wait and see what they are, but Sydney have obviously started 1-2 for the season, so haven't been great. They beat them by 20 points. They beat Essendon by 26 points, but Essendon haven't shown much in the other game that they played, and they beat Carlton by 20 points, who are 0-2. So we'll wait and see what we get from that, I guess. But in the end, they're 3-0. They're doing a lot of things right. Their clearance game probably hasn't been sensational just yet, I don't think. They haven't really dominated games, but at the same time, they've done what they needed to, and they've got the wins. GWS, they're 2-0. They started absolutely sensationally against Collingwood, won by 52 points that day, and then not fantastic, but they got the job done against Melbourne in another win. So 2-0 to start the season. I've lost the plot there. These two teams did meet twice last year. I think it was Manuka Oval the second time in round 21. It was a GWS home game. GWS got up over them by 2 points in the game for one of the games of the season. It was actually a really good game. 12-12, 84 to 12-10, 82. GWS won that one. And they actually met down at Utah Stadium last year as well, in what was perhaps a really good indicator of what we're going to see this weekend. It was a day game then. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in attendance. It was a weird sort of game because late in the second quarter, GWS kicked a few goals and really put themselves into a good spot. It was a low-scoring affair in the first half, but 38-19, so they were up 19 points at half-time. But Hawthorn were all over them in the second half and kicked poorly in this one, 12 goals, 13 to 12-7. So certainly had their opportunities to win it, Hawthorn, and they did win it in the end, but only by 6 points when perhaps looked like maybe they had better control of the game than they did. But in the end, they got the job done. That's all that really matters, I guess. And then the time before that was also a GWS home game in 2023, round 17. GWS won it by 13 points. History says Utah Stadium, Hawthorn are really hard to beat. I think they went 4-0 there last year. GWS was probably the biggest of those wins in terms of good teams. The other three teams that they beat down there were not final teams. They beat, I think, Fremantle, they beat St Kilda, and they beat North Melbourne. So, yeah. Only 1 out of 4 went on to play finals. But it was a big scalp, and it was this one. So, a rematch. It's going to be close, I think. I think Hawthorn at the moment look quite comfortable favourites. So, once again, the line doesn't look too bad for GWS. I think Hawthorn will deserve to go into this as favourites. But don't write off GWS. I think Stringer's probably going to come in for his first game for the Giants. Be interesting to see how he goes for them. Hawthorn, I don't think they'll be too concerned about that. They have a lot of key defenders. They have a lot of good defenders. It's probably their best area of the ground is their back line. Their midfield's also pretty good, and their forward line's solid enough. So, yeah, they don't have too many weaknesses, Hawthorn, at the moment, from what we can see. It's a long season. I don't think we've seen anything too special from Hawthorn yet, but maybe this is the win they need to show the world what they really are. It's going to be a cracking game. I'll be there. It will be exciting. I can't believe I'm going to Hawthorn games 2 weeks in a row. That's crazy. But tune in Saturday night. 2 good games. Probably the 2 best games of the round against each other on Saturday night, which is a little disappointing. But, yeah, it is what it is. Can't control it. So that's the end of Saturday football. We jump into Sunday football. There's only 2 matches on Sunday this week. First up, we have the Crows hosting the Kangaroos. Crows who have been flying. Kangaroos who last week looked sensational. It will be at Adelaide Oval, so you got to think that really puts the ball into Adelaide's court here. They're going to go in heavy favourites. Kangaroos, though, did look all right last week. So Adelaide obviously 2-0. They smashed St Kilda round 1 in Adelaide. Followed it up with absolute smashing of Essendon round 2. At the moment, they've played 2 games. They've scored 135 and 161. They've also conceded 172 points in those 2 games total. So high-scoring games. Kangaroos also have been scoring quite highly. Scored 97 and 125 and conceded 113 and 66. That tells me that this is going to be a high-scoring game. It could be one of the more high-scoring games of the season. It's shaping up that it will be. This Adelaide forward line is all guns blazing. The history of these 2 teams over the last couple of years has also been pretty high-scoring. The last 2 times they've met, Adelaide have scored 138 both times, and the time before that they scored 103. And each of the 3 times, North Melbourne scored over 70 as well. So pretty high-scoring games between these 2 teams. The fact that Adelaide is absolutely lighting up the scoreboard so far this year, expect to see that again. They go full attack, I think. I think that's how they play. Every time they conceded a goal last week against Essendon, they put up a board that's a boxing glove, which I assume is counterpunch. I could be completely wrong. But every time they conceded a goal, they put it up and they just keep attacking. It's what they did all day against St Kilda. It's what they did all game against the Bombers. So I would expect to see that happen again here. Kangaroos last year did concede some big scores against some multiple teams. So I would expect Adelaide to be too good for Kangaroos, but don't be surprised, if the scoreline reads pretty similar to what the Bombers game did last week. Maybe slightly closer for North Melbourne here. I wouldn't be surprised to see it end up being 145 to 110 as the final score. Adelaide, they've just started perfectly. Their defense is a little bit of a concern for them. They need to probably not concede as much as they have been, but at the same time, when your offense is going as well as it is, maybe it's not too bad, too much of a concern, because their forward line is flying. Obviously, they have 3 key tools, and they also have some really good small forwards around them. Neil Bullen, Ben Keys, Joshua Shelley. Chuck in their midfield that's absolute dominant. Dawson. Crouch was really good last week, as was Saligo. So they don't really have too many issues at the moment. So Crows, it should be a good game. I think better game than maybe people expect. Based on North Melbourne actually showing up last week, has filled me with a little bit of confidence that maybe they won't be terrible in this. But if Adelaide are genuine contenders, like many people are saying at the moment, they just have to win this game. And win it. I won't say comfortably, but they have to win it. They have to win it. I think that's everything from that game. Jump into the final game of the round. And it's the Western Derby. It's West Coast v Fremantle. Sunday evening, 6:10 Eastern Time, which is like 3:10 Western Time. It's the Western Derby. 2 teams that are under the pump. Neither team has won a game yet this season. They're going into this 0-2 v 0-2. I think they're 17th and 18th on the ladder. Ladder. They are 17th and 18th on the ladder going into this. Wowee. Talk about an important game for Fremantle. Many people had them not just in their top 8 this year, but had them in the top 4, and they've come out and gone 0-2. West Coast, I think people wanted to see improvement from them, and week 1 they did not see that against Gold Coast, but week 2 they were a lot better against Brisbane. They were competitive up at the Gabba, so they were winning. They never felt like they were the better team on the day, but they stuck around. Meanwhile, Fremantle looked atrocious against Geelong, followed it up with a pretty solid performance against Sydney. They were really good early. Sydney's poor kicking early kind of made it look better than it probably was for the Dockers, but they just got beaten. 3 points, had their chances. It's a kind of a game that could have gone either way. In the end, Sydney took the points and puts Freo in a position where they have a very important game. If you go back to their first Western Derby last year against West Coast, which was similar time of the year, round 6, so an extra couple weeks later, April 20 last year, West Coast actually won it by 37 points in a game where Fremantle did not show up and did not look like they were a chance at any point of that match. West Coast just controlled it and won it. They obviously met again later in the season, and Fremantle did turn the tables. Not convincingly dominating the game. They did win by about 35 points. So there's that. Go back to 2023, the second time they met, and Fremantle won it by 101 points. So history does probably say Fremantle are going to win this one, I think. But, sorry, I was just looking at the light on my shirt. I just don't see a world where Fremantle don't come out and want to win this by 50 plus. I think Eagles were much better last week. They'll have to play even better again, I think, to win this. And Fremantle just have to win. They have to find a way to turn this around. Otherwise, their season is getting out of hand very quickly. Last year, they started 3-0. This year, they're in danger of starting 0-3, which is pretty funny because Brisbane were the exact opposite. I just don't know what to make of Fremantle so far this year. I know they're missing a lot of players and key players in their midfield. Hayden Young is very highly rated by me and by many others, but I have been very much on the Hayden Young bandwagon for a while now, and I think he will be a massive inclusion when he does return. Obviously, Fife is also a gun in that centre square, so he's important to them. But they just, you can't be dropping this to West Coast, is basically what I'm saying. That kind of loss last year was what probably in the end cost them finals. I know they lost their last 4 games going into finals last year, which was the real reason they missed finals. But games like early season when they did lose to West Coast were certainly like signs of why they didn't play finals. When you miss finals by like half a game and you lost to West Coast when West Coast had only won 1 game for the season, it's not great, basically. That's all 8 games. This is my power rankings. We'll have a quick look at them, and then we'll do my tips, and then that'll be pretty much episode wrap. Before we go through power rankings, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know who's going to win this weekend. Who's your lock? Who are we jumping on? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe or follow as well. Power rankings. Brisbane, I still have them on top. They weren't fantastic last weekend, but they got the job done. They did what they needed to, so they stay on top. Hawthorn, they move up 1 spot. I'm still not fully convinced with them. As I have said, they haven't really shown me a huge amount. They only beat Carlton by 20 points. They only beat Essendon by like 26 points. So we're not fully convinced on them just yet, but at the same time, they haven't put a foot wrong, so they go up a spot. Geelong, they lost to St Kilda. We kind of forgive it, but at the same time, you can't completely just ignore it, so they drop a spot. GWS had the bye last week, so they stay 4th. Sydney, they won last week against Fremantle, but I don't think it was convincing enough to move them up a spot, so they stay 5th. Collingwood and Bulldogs swap positions because Collingwood did win. I know Bulldogs are missing a lot of players, so by that synopsis, I guess you can probably say maybe Bulldogs are the better team, but on current form, Collingwood go above them. Gold Coast in 8th. They had the bye last week. In all honesty, if they play like they did in round 1 this weekend, they could well move up a couple spots. Adelaide did play last week. If they play like they did either of the first 2 weeks, they will probably move up a spot or two. Granted, they are playing North Melbourne this weekend, but wouldn't be surprised. They should be probably in the 8 after this weekend if they win again. Port Adelaide, in a crazy circumstance, won a game by 80 points and did actually drop a spot. Bit rough for them, but Adelaide are 2-0 and Port Adelaide are 1-1. So Port Adelaide are in 10th at the moment. Carlton 11th. They stay in the same spot. I'm not doom and gloom for them just yet, but maybe I will be after this weekend. St Kilda move up 3 spots after a really good win against Geelong. Big game for them this weekend. They should win again. Potentially jump above Carlton. Maybe even Port Adelaide if the Power lose to the Bombers. Fremantle, they sit 13th. I'm not writing them off yet, but they need to turn their season around. North Melbourne, a sensational performance on the weekend. They deserve to go up 2 spots. Well done to them. Great performance. Essendon lose 3 spots for their loss to Adelaide. I think it's safe to say right now, at the moment, they're probably in the bottom 4, certainly bottom 5 teams in the competition based on what we've seen so far this year. That could turn around quite quickly. This time last year, Hawthorn were the second worst team in the competition. Melbourne, they're 16th. They lose 2 spots for their loss to North Melbourne. I was reasonably confident with them after round 1 performance, but round 2 was atrocious. They go down to 16. I would imagine they probably will jump above Essendon over the next couple of weeks. Richmond 17. They weren't great on the weekend. They got absolutely thrashed, but they have won a game, and they did look good when they won that game. So I'm keeping them above West Coast for now, who sit 18th. If West Coast beat Fremantle, though, they will jump straight above Richmond. But we're not convinced either way with them at the moment. We jump into my footy tips for this weekend. This was done yesterday, which was Tuesday. So 2 days ago for you if you're watching this when it goes out. And as I've kind of explained through this, I've kind of changed some of my tips. These will be my official All Aussie Rules podcast tips, though. Whether I tip the same online or not, we'll see. But Port Adelaide by 21 points should be too strong for the Bombers, I think. The Doggies were gone by 7 points over Carlton. I think that should be a close game. Gold Coast should be too good based on what we saw week 1 from them to win by 25. St Kilda should be way too good for Richmond. 41-point winners. Brisbane have got by 13 points against Geelong in what should be a cracker. Hawthorn by 3 points on GWS. I think Hawthorn's history at Utah Stadium is just too good to ignore. They should be really good in this one. Adelaide will be too strong for North Melbourne, 35-point winners, and Fremantle should be too good for West Coast. Should win by 31. We had a bad week on the tips last week, so this week we're coming back. We're going to bounce back, and we're going to do a good performance. Let me know what you think my tips will do this week in the comments below. That's pretty much a wrap on this episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Go check out all my socials, especially Twitter, especially Instagram. Actually, just do them all. Go find them all. All Aussie Rules everywhere. Go find them. Go like them. Go follow them. Appreciate you if you stuck around. I hope you enjoy my content. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep pumping out the content. There's going to be YouTube videos coming out next week, so check them out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week. This is All Aussie Rules. See you then.